Hello everyone and welcome to day 13 of the 30-day film challenge, and today's prompt is a film that put you in deep thoughts. And I was going to pick Arrival, but instead I'm going to decide to push that video back for later on in this film series. So we're going to be talking about Donnie Darko, which I find this movie absolutely fascinating. I just want to share my experience with this movie and why you guys should definitely see this movie. I will get into spoilers, so I'm going to say this right here and right now. Watch this movie. It is for free on IMDb TV. You might have to deal with some ads, but it is completely 100% free for anybody to watch. If you have Amazon Prime, you can watch it on there as well through IMDb TV. That's what I did. So like I said, spoilers, let's jump right into Donnie Darko. Like I said, I watched the director's cut version of this movie, which I think the way I watched it was the first time I watched this movie, I watched the theatrical version. And then I think this was the first time I ever watched the director's cut, because I thought I did before. Maybe I just looked up some of the pages of the philosophy of time travel that is interspliced with the director's cut of this movie. But I don't think I've ever seen it, because there's some weird things with the eye flickering and water and this weird image of these like futuristic buildings over water that's super weird that I don't remember at all. And one scene that I completely didn't remember at all. So I don't think I've ever seen the director's cut before. So that was a great experience. If you guys want to buy this movie, definitely go for it so you can watch the director's cut. But I think I watched it as theatrical the first time I watched it. And I was super confused. I had no idea what was going on. All I knew was that I was so curious as to what anything in this movie meant, because you can clearly tell that the movie is trying to tell you certain things about fate and about destiny, about religion, and about the goods and the bads and like conservative views and liberal views, and it has a lot. This movie's a lot the first time you watch it, and there's no way anybody could watch this movie fully understanding it the first time they watch it. Like, there's no way. This movie is one of those films that require a second viewing, and that's why this second viewing was so important to me. I think this is the third time I've watched this movie, but like I said, the first time I watched the director's cut. So I would honestly recommend watching in that way. Watch the theatrical version, be confused as hell, and then if you really like it, go for it, buy the DVD or the Blu-ray and watch this director's cut, because it's very much worth it. And so I can go over like the thousands of theories on this movie of how things work, but I'm going to tell you guys my interpretation of this movie, and it's not really my interpretation, it's really the interpretation that I heard first and that I've kind of bought into, and I will add some more extra stuff that I thought myself after watching this movie and why I think this movie works so well, and the fact that it is so open to interpretations that really any of them work and there's not one correct answer. And so the way I see it, which is derived from the director's cuts, where it has inserts of the living receiver and the manipulated living and the manipulated dead, and then the tangent universe and the primary universe and all those type of ideas that is just kind of crazy out of this fictional book within the movie. And so let's just dive into what these terms mean. So as I see it, the movie starts off with Donnie waking up on that road at the end of the movie where he sees the giant portal. I'm saying all this stuff assuming that you guys have seen it. So if you have not seen this movie and you're listening to me say this, you'll be super confused. But hopefully you've seen the movie. So the movie opens up with Donnie on this stretch of road that you see at the end of the movie where he sees that wormhole open up and he sees the artifact fall through it that ends up hitting his house and killing him at the end of the movie. But the opening scene is something that I'll get into a little bit later, and some of the theories about how this tangent universe is repetitive and it's a constant loop, which I am back and forth on that idea, but that's how the movie opens, so I wanted to mention that right off the bat. But as the film goes on, he goes to his home, you are introduced to his sister, to his parents, to a couple of other weird characters. You have all the manipulated living characters, which are his teachers, and Patrick Swayze's character, and the one angry mom lady. I guess she was a teacher as well, but I hate her with a passion. And you have all these different characters guiding Donnie through his journey. But what happens is the 6-foot-tall, evil-looking bunny rabbit named Frank shows up and tells him to kind of follow him, and tells him in 28 days and a certain amount of hours and minutes and seconds, the world will come to an end. And he's woken up and he is dragged through his house. He's basically sleepwalking, listening to this hallucination of this bunny rabbit that is terrifying looking, by the way. That looks really cool. I want to dress up as this thing for Halloween one year, which is exactly what he is. He's a Halloween costume, but you don't know that. You just think he's a creepy, weird bunny telling him that the world is going to end. And it's very weird the first time you watch it, but essentially he's let out of the house, and this artifact, this jet engine, falls onto his house, into his room, that would have killed him. And you see him come back to his house, he sees all the chaos that's happening. You have the teacher from iCarly as an agent in the federal government in this movie. And so at this point you gotta think, okay, what is happening first? What happened first? So let's get into this whole tangent universe thing, because a tangent universe is created when an artifact or a glitch in the world or in space-time happens and an artifact is duplicated. So you have 3 different jet engines in this movie as I see it, and as I've read in separate articles. You have the first artifact. I might be mixing up the order of the artifacts, but to me what makes sense is the first artifact is the original plane that you see at the end of the movie that's his mom and his sister will fly in the primary universe. That's the plane that actually exists in the real world. The second artifact is that same plane that the mom and the daughter are flying in the tangent universe, the one that he ends up breaking in half at the end of the movie. And the third artifact is the one at the beginning of the movie that falls onto his house. That is the glitch in the system. That is the one that causes the tangent universe to be created, because when there is a glitch like this, that creates a tangent universe for the universe to kind of pick a living receiver to put the world back together so they can destroy this tangent universe and go back to the primary universe. Now, if you understood any of that, a hand to you. Congratulations, you have at least the basic understanding that I have of this movie. So that is what this jet engine is at the beginning of the movie. It is the third artifact that created this tangent universe, and because of this, Frank the Bunny has come back in time to kind of guide Jake Gyllenhaal's character through this entire situation in order to get that artifact back to the primary universe to let this tangent universe fall apart. So again, if you're understanding anything I'm saying, congrats to you. You deserve a pat on the back, because I'm hardly understanding what I'm saying right now. So Jake Gyllenhaal is the living receiver who is guided by the manipulated dead and the manipulated living to get to the point where he needs to be in order to make the decision to essentially die and sacrifice himself to save the world. That is basically his goal, and all the characters in this movie's goal. And it's kind of a debate on whether or not these characters are conscious and they actively know that they're in a tangent universe and that they need Jake Gyllenhaal's character to go through these I guess moments in his life to push him towards making that decision at the end of the movie. You look at the teachers that kind of tell him certain things of what is happening, and they know exactly when to say it, and you're not sure if he knows that or if they know that they're trying to push him towards this, or if the manipulated dead are the ones who knows. I think that is the more likely thing. I think the manipulated living is subconsciously guiding Donnie through this journey, and they don't necessarily know that they have a greater purpose, I guess, selected by God, because like I said, this has a lot of religious things in the movie as well. But I think that they're subconsciously doing these things. I don't think they're actively pushing Donnie in the direction he needs to go, but they're being pushed into it by themselves to guide him. It's really confusing, but I think the manipulated dead, which would be Jena Malone's character and would be Frank the Bunny Rabbit, that are the ones that know what's going on and that they know that they need to get Donnie to a certain place. And I think it's a little confusing because you know for a fact that Frank is the one who knows for a fact, because he's the one telling Donnie to do this certain things that he needs to do. But Jena Malone's character is kind of odd because it doesn't seem like she seems like she's along for the ride, and you think that she's one of the manipulated living, but she does die in the end, so she is one of the manipulated dead, and she has the wrong English class at the beginning of the movie, and she chooses to sit next to Donnie, so you kind of think maybe that she knows that she's pushing him in the right direction. And again, I'll connect this all to the opening scene later on when it comes to this debate and what I think, but by the end of the movie, you see what happens. All these things, all these elements guide Donnie to go to Grandma Death's house to find the cellar door that Drew Barrymore's character wrote on the chalkboard. Like I said, very confusing. I'm bouncing all over the place here, but the point is, they get to that house. Jena Malone's character gets hit by a car by Frank the Bunny Rabbit, and Donnie decides to kill Frank, shoots him in the eye that you see him damaged by at the beginning of the movie, and halfway through the movie when Donnie is kind of stabbing him in the eye through the mirror, which again, I'll loop all this back to the beginning of the movie here in a second. But this leads him to see that she has died, for him to take her to say goodbye to his family, and then he takes her to that strip of road that you see at the beginning of the movie, and you see that plane fly over this vortex, and he decides with his newfound powers, because that's another thing I haven't mentioned, he has telekinetic powers, he has super strength, he has this ability to see these weird liquid bubbles coming out of his chest. Weird movies. I sound insane, but this all happens in the movie, but it all guides him to this moment where he decides that even though his mom and his sister is on that plane, and I think he knows that they are on that plane, he breaks it in half, he makes the jet engine fall through this loop, that he then wakes up in his bed back 28 days earlier on October 2nd, and he starts laughing because he knows that he is about to die and that he just saved the world. But the tragic part is nobody else in this primary universe will know what he did and what he sacrificed to get to this point. And so let's loop back to the beginning opening scene of the movie where he wakes up on the stretch of road and then he smiles. Now there's a theory that the tangent universe is a constant loop, and it repeats and it repeats and it repeats, and the more it repeats itself, the more unstable it gets until it was finally successful in getting Donnie to do the things that he does. Now, this theory stems because, he has that smile, and at certain points he feels like he knows what's happening, and he sees the path that he's going on, and so it's kind of suggested that he, along with the manipulated living, kind of subconsciously knows what's happening with him, and he kind of knows that he needs to get to this place, but the people around him aren't pushing him enough, or he's not pushing himself enough to actually be able to make that sacrifice by the end of the movie. And this theory is kind of back and forth for me, because I think in one way, you take the idea of fate that's presented in this movie, and this is the same idea of fate that's presented in Arrival, which is, if you can see this path ahead of you, that kind of, and you see everybody following their direct path, this path set by God, or this path that you were going to take, and he decides to follow it. But the teacher who's in Falling Skies, like I said, a lot of actors kind of show up in this movie that are in other movies that are very popular. He was from Falling Skies, and he's great in that show, but he's excellent in this movie. But he says the fact that you can see this path that God has set for you means that you have the choice to change it, and you have the choice to go against this path. And that is an idea that's presented in Arrival as well, where he decides to follow this path. He decides to follow the bubble path that leads him wherever he goes. He never decides to break that path. Does that mean that he's always destined to follow that path no matter what, or did he have a choice to begin with? Because if he decided to go somewhere else, then you know for a fact that he had a choice. But the fact that he goes on that path leaves you with the question of whether or not he had a choice and he chose to stay on that path, or whether he didn't have a choice at all and he was meant to go on that path no matter what. And I think that is a very fascinating idea that this movie presents, along with Arrival, that I wrote a 12-page essay on when it comes to Arrival. I love the fact that this movie has that same idea, and I think you can take that philosophy to this idea of this idea that it's a repeating loop, because if it's a repeating loop, then it makes sense, right? He goes through everything, and he knows what he needs to do, and these other characters are trying to push him in the way that he needs to be pushed, and this has all happened before. That's how he knew which eye to stab Frank in, because he knew that he was going to later kill him and shoot him in the eye. That's why he wasn't as freaked out by everything. But if you look at it in terms of this is the first time all this is happening, it still makes sense. And I think that's a theory that I still stick with. I think it's a coincidence maybe that he woke up on that street. Maybe that's a place that he likes to go to, and that's why he goes there at the end of the movie, because that's kind of his spot to look over the city. I think it's a little odd to say that it's a repeating loop, because I'm not sure. It works either way is the point that I'm trying to get at. And same thing with that theory of fate and whether or not you stay on that path or not. It's kind of ambiguous, because it could really be either one, and we can never truly know what the truth of this movie is. But we do know what the truth of this movie is through the director's cut, and you see the pages from the philosophy of time travel, and you see that there's a tangent universe, a primary universe. You're able to separate those things. You know who the living receivers are, you know who the manipulated dead is, you know who the manipulated living is, and you can kind of separate all those pieces out. But the one piece of the puzzle that you will never figure out, I think, is whether or not this path he is set on was chosen by him, or he had a choice whether or not to do it. Because if he had a choice to do it, then I would believe in the repeated theory. The theory that it keeps on repeating, because maybe he chose to go against that in his past repetitions of this. And maybe that's why this is the only one where he follows it, and this is the only one where it's successful. Or you can take that idea where no matter what, he was on this path and he was stuck with it, and that would be the idea that this is the first time that it's happening, and everything just works so perfectly because all these pieces were put into place to get Donnie to where he needed to go and make him accept the fact that he's going to sacrifice himself. This is honestly one of my favorite Jake Gyllenhaal performances ever. He's my favorite actor. I have a movie that's coming out tomorrow for day 14 of the 30-day film challenge that also has Jake Gyllenhaal in it, that also has Hugh Jackman in it, and they're both kind of in my series a lot. So tomorrow I'm going to be watching Prisoners. I'm going to do my video on Prisoners. It's going to definitely be a shorter video than today's video. I've talked a lot about this movie because, again, I find it fascinating. This is my thoughts and analysis of this movie and how I see it. And so I love Jake Gyllenhaal and I love Hugh Jackman, so I'm going to do Prisoners for tomorrow for the prompt of what movie made you super depressed. That's a depressing movie. That's a very bleak and dark movie, and I love it. But that is what we're going to talk about tomorrow. So thanks guys for watching my video on Donnie Darko, the director's cut version of this movie. Definitely go seek it out. It's free on IMDb TV. If you watch this without watching the movie and you're hearing the things that I'm saying and you're still here at this point, you must be super, super confused. Watch this movie. You might understand it. If you're watching this for your first explained video of this movie, thanks for watching. Thanks for choosing my video. And hopefully that I made some of these things make sense to you. You might need to do some of your own research because I don't know. It's a hard movie to wrap your brain around. But nonetheless, this is really the perfect movie for today's prompt of a movie that put me in deep thoughts because it's one of the first movies that made me really think about film. And watching Chris Stuckman's analysis was one of those videos that really made me look at movies in a different way. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. If you liked it, leave a comment below. Tell me what your thoughts of Donnie Darko is and your different theories and your analysis of it. I'd love to hear it. So thanks guys for watching this video, and I hope to see you all in my next one.